Welcome to the Texas Conflict Coach radio program. If you've ever experienced or engaged in destructive or unresolved conflict, then you know it leads to broken relationships, distrust, and damaging results. Our program will help you manage and resolve conflict effectively with strategies, valuable resources, and support. Since 2009, our radio program hosted guest experts from around the globe sharing their perspectives, experiences, and expertise while giving you food for thought. If you can't listen live, then download and listen to any of our 300-plus podcasts in our library at texasconflictcoach.com. So sit back, relax, or join the conversation every Tuesday evening, or tweet us at TXConflictCoach.
Hi, this is Zena Zumeta, your guest host. Our program today is Theater of Witness, which is a form of performance in which the true life stories of people whose voices haven't been heard in society are performed by the storytellers themselves as a way for audiences to bear witness to significant social issues. The theater productions are scripted from individual and group interviews, as well as a variety of creative process techniques, and consist of scripted text, music, movement, imagery, and film projection. The productions are created with the performers who themselves have directly experienced the issues that are being explored. Theater of Witness invites audiences to put a face and heart to societal issues of suffering and to celebrate the power of the human spirit to grow and transform. Theater of Witness is a form of peace building and inspiration. Joining me today is Teya Sepinuck, the founder and director of the Theater of Witness model of performance that gives voice to those whose stories haven't been heard in society. Since 1986, she's been creating and producing Theater of Witness projects in the United States, Poland, and Northern Ireland with prisoners and their families, survivors and perpetrators of abuse and violence, refugees, immigrants, elders, and those who have lived through war. The stories of the performers are performed by the people themselves and woven together with music, film, and poetic imagery as a way for audiences to bear witness to stories of suffering, transformation, and peace. Teya is the recipient of the Philadelphia Human Rights Award for Arts and Culture from the Philadelphia Commission on Human Relations, a Local Hero Award from the Bank of America, as well as the Cultural Arts Award from Women's Way and the Mayor's Commission on Women. She was just named the Chair of Theatrical Innovation by Holywell Trust, an organization in Northern Ireland devoted to peace and reconciliation. She has a long-time meditation practice which informs all of her work and life. Her book, Theater of Witness, Finding the Medicine in Stories of Suffering, Transformation, and Peace, was published in February 2013 by Jessica Kingsley Press. Welcome to the program, Teya.
Oh, thank you, Zena.
So I'm wondering if we could just start with the question, what is Theater of Witness?
Yes, well, I can describe it, but I think what I'd love to do first is read you the prelude to my book, which I think takes us inside of it. So here it starts. I am crouching in the wings of the theater. I'll start again. I am crouching in the wings of the theater, watching the performance of Children of Cambodia, Children of War. From the side angle, I see Hong Peach's graceful silhouette balance as she perches on her right leg and her hands glide through the air in slow motion. Her fingers touch and trace invisible lines in the soft blue light. Her beauty is pure and lingers like perfume. Then, with a boisterous shout, the Cambodian teen boys bound through the space, cajoling each other as they flip higher and higher over ropes before collapsing into a pile of limbs on the floor. One laughs. Another turns serious. If this is so much fun, why can't I remember? Tim's eyes fill with unshed tears. Haunting chords of music increase in volume. The reason is because so many horrible things happened in our country. It keeps us from remembering the good things. Our country used to be a peaceful place to live in, but now because of the Holocaust, our people are being killed one by one. One of my first memories is seeing people dying on the street, bullets everywhere, piles of bones. They would line people up one by one in a straight line, and with one bullet, they could get many. My mom, she was holding my hand. My feet were burning. I had no clothes on. My country is a red river with bullets and blood. From there, the memories pour out. Even though I've heard these stories countless times, transcribed and scripted the text, directed the performers for hours on end, I am riveted to my spot and I almost forget to breathe. This moment is so embedded with tragedy, authenticity, and beauty. The stories are nearly unbearable. Yet here are these young people, strong, resilient, alive. They have survived war, starvation, refugee camps, and the journey to this place. They want to bring us back to bear witness. The show ends with these words that they have written. Our eyes cry the tears. Our blood screams for our people killed. Our skin calls us back. We want to tell you so we won't forget. We want to show you so you'll remember. We want to involve you so you'll understand. We will survive. We will survive. And with that, the audience is on its feet. My face is wet with tears, and I don't quite know how this has become my life. My story and those of the performers are intertwined in a miraculous process of theater of witness. I don't know where I end and they begin, or where tragedy and beauty meet. I know nothing. I am empty and full, and I am grateful beyond belief. There is nowhere else I'd rather be, nothing else I'd rather do. I am in love with the performers, this work, and the process. This is home for me.
And how powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So it does. I mean, that really does describe what the process is. And you said that you script it, that what they do. So can you talk about that process?
Yes, I interview prospective performers and then the performers for hours on end in one-on-one interviews. And really it's more like being with somebody and listening. There's not a prescribed list of questions. And I take impeccable notes with every word that they say, because oftentimes people speak in their own poetic voice, not even knowing the wisdom that they're imparting and the imagery. And then I bring them eventually together in a group, and we do a lot of creative process all together. And I script it from all the things that have happened with their own words, and then give them the opportunity to make changes that they want, to make additions until they sign off on it. And then they memorize it and get directed just as they would in normal theater.
What would you say that the purpose of this work is?
I would say it is really for people to come together to bear witness and to find what I always call the medicine in the stories of suffering and transformation. It's clear that there's a great healing for the performers always. They describe the power of being able to voice a story often that's been hidden or held in shame, or they felt that nobody cared about them, and to find that audience members thank them and say, thank you for sharing this. This helps me with my life, and for the performers, they become the experts. But it is not a form of therapy, and it is really, my job is to make something that works as a theater piece on its own, that will move people and will help them humanize the other and open their own selves up to the possibility of change and seeing people and issues in a new light.
Wow. So why theater? Why did you choose the process of theater rather than something like therapy or writing or...
Well, I had been a dancer, and I taught dance and composition for many years, so I was used to the performing arts and the power of that. And there was a very organic process of me at one point making a dance that used an audio track of my grandfather, who was 88 at the time, and my son, who was 3 months old, giggling, and my grandfather talking about his great-grandson being born. And I got very interested in the story of that. And I thought, wow, I'm more interested in the story than I am in the choreography. And decided that I wanted to make a theater piece about aging as a way for me to understand aging. And I brought a group of people together, and I sort of had no idea what I was inventing, but I started to invent this process. And it was unbelievable, the first performance of the first piece that I did. The people were just sobbing in their seats and on their, on their feet at the end. And there was such love, and it is a vehicle to really plant seeds, I think, and to move people and to inspire people.
What do you mean by planting seeds? What kind of seeds?
Well, it's interesting. I just was giving a presentation last week, and it was really around the issue, especially of inner city violence and black-on-black violence and incarceration. And often afterwards, people want to know, what can they do? How can they affect political change or social change? How can they make a difference? And I always think that this work brings people together to inspire them to then do what they do well in the world. I'm not the person that is great helping to change the laws, but what I can do is bring people together and hopefully ignite the fire in them so that they will bring their gifts into the world to bring change.
Interesting. Well, so to do this work, you really have to get people to open up and to tell their stories.
Yeah.
How do you think you do that?
I think that people are hungry to tell their stories, all of us, and that what is the deficit is that we don't usually have a safe space where someone wants to listen. And I love to listen to people. I love sitting with people in intimacy and bearing witness to them. And people end up often telling me things that they say they've never said out loud. Maybe they haven't even told themselves this. And my job is really just to hold the mirror, to write their words down, to hold their story in my heart, and to help them see the beauty that's there already, the pearls of wisdom that they hold, that they might be temporarily blinded to. And then when
go ahead.
When in Northern Ireland especially, I was bringing people together across great divides, former enemies, paramilitaries on both sides, bringing paramilitaries together with victims of the Troubles and security forces, people that would not be in a room together and that would have held a lot of preconceived notions and hatred towards each other. And so to create a safe environment for them to share their stories is so beautiful, and for them to actually participate on stage in each other's stories and understand the importance of it, even if it wasn't their story. They see this is the other side, and it could, accident of birth, that could have been me.
So you create the stories with both sides present, and then they actually act in each other's stories. That's amazing.
Yeah, if there are often, scenes where you want to show more people. Like one of them recently, there was a prison governor, which is what we would call a superintendent, who had been deeply threatened and had, I think, 6 death threats on him, had to move his house many times, and the paramilitaries were trying to kill him. And to bring him together with former paramilitaries was really extraordinary. But we needed to create the prison scene and to give that sense. And so the rest of the performers became the prisoners for a while. They're not telling the person's story, but they're becoming the other characters to help bring it to life.
So from your first experience with your grandfather, I love that story, how did you end up going to Northern Ireland, to Poland, to the other countries that you've been to?
This is always a mystery to me. I don't understand how it works. People have seen the work and then made introductions to people. I have a dear friend who is my colleague at Swarthmore College, and she actually had a connection with a dance company in Poland, and they were interested in working with some disenfranchised girls living in an orphanage who had been street kids. And so they brought me over for that. And then somebody there saw my work and invited me, saw that I had worked with men serving life sentences in Pennsylvania, and brought me to work with prisoners in Warsaw. And this same friend actually showed some of my DVDs to some people in Northern Ireland, and then they invited me to come. So it's a question of getting the work out there for people to see it and then say, wow, maybe we're ready to tell these stories. But it is a little magical. You can't just sort of send out your resume and say, I want to come. You need people that are visionary, that want to invest in this.
And have you done this work across the United States or mostly on the East Coast?
It's mostly been in the East Coast because at the beginning I had a company, a nonprofit called Tova that I did this work through. And, we were getting grants to do this work in this area. Now I'm really hoping to be teaching more and giving presentations because most of these works are also on film. So I like to give presentations and show excerpts from the prisoners and, excerpts from the teenage girls or the children of prisoners or refugees, people in political sanctuary, and weave a program of inspiration and hope together by showing the clips. So I'm hoping to do that more and more.
Oh, and are these videos available on your website or?
Yes. So a lot of them you can see them just on the website, which is theaterofwitness.org, spelled theater with the ER in the end. Unfortunately, some of the Northern Ireland, two of the biggest films can't be shown because they have some BBC footage on it, so we couldn't put that in the website. But people can write to me, and there are ways to see this. Yeah.
Oh, how beautiful. So what do you think the impact is, I guess, first on the performers, but also on the audiences?
People often tell me that this was the biggest transformation of their lives, that it opened up a huge sense of possibility for them, that there was deep healing. I've had people say, I've been in therapy for so many years and I never got anywhere, and Theater of Witness is what really helped me to grow and change. And then what we do in all the performances is we give people blank paper in the audience and ask them to just write their reflections. And so I have thousands and thousands of people writing, telling us this was the most powerful thing I've ever seen. I remember one of the people wrote in Northern Ireland, this was like open heart surgery on our city. People just they sometimes write their own stories, and they just keep thanking us, and they say I saw bravery and courage in action. Sometimes people write, I've been a paramilitary, I've wanted to kill people, today I see another side. It's really quite extraordinary. Yeah. It really is overwhelming. People get, because they know they're not seeing actors. They know they're seeing the real people who are really taking accountability and expressing themselves poetically but deeply truthfully. And there's real power in that.
Amazing. Well, let me just remind people that you are listening to the Texas Conflict Coach Blog Talk radio program, and we are talking about Theater of Witness with Teya Sepinuck. When you talk about this work, it sounds totally healing. You've described it as medicine. So do you consider this healing work? Do you consider it drama? How do you see it?
Well, the reason I call it Theater of Witness is I didn't want to call it theater because, theater and some theater is for entertainment, and, theater has usually are plays that often have plots, and this work doesn't have that. So I wanted it to be, it's more testimonial theater, so it's the idea of bearing witness. And it is not drama therapy. It is not theater of the oppressed, which is, both of those are incredibly wonderful forms. It is, if you come as an audience member, you see an hour and 15-minute theater piece that looks incredibly professional. The performers know what they're doing. It's scripted. There's lighting. There's music. There's often film in the background. It's well crafted, and yet there's an air of authenticity about it. So it is very healing. But I think probably originally theater was started for people as a form of storytelling, as a way to heal wounds. So I'm always a little worried using that word, because people often ask me, it's drama therapy. And drama therapy's purpose is not to bring people together to witness. And it has a therapeutic process. And my job is to make the most powerful theater piece I can make to serve these stories and to serve the healing.
I see. So I love that term, serving the stories. And I see what you're saying about the witness. So it's really the witness to the stories. And yet you have called it transforming. Mm-hmm. Can you say more about that transformation?
Yes. I'll use as an example a couple that I worked with who had been in political sanctuary from El Salvador, and they had the husband had death threats, and they left their 3 children, and they crossed the desert and got beaten and sent to a refugee camp and almost died, and eventually got political sanctuary. And the woman, the wife, actually became mute. She refused to learn English. The husband was beating her. There was a lot of domestic abuse. And they were in one of my projects. And a few years after that project, the husband called me up and said to me, I've been committing domestic abuse on my wife, and when I call the hotline, nobody will help me, and I've been praying, and every time I pray, your name comes up. Will you make a piece for me? So I made a piece that with a lot of men, and his story was part of it. And a year later, his wife came up to me and she said, you saved our marriage. And I said, how? And she said, he saw himself in the mirror through his story, and he got therapy. He stopped drinking. And now I want to be in a piece. And a whole long story. Eventually, I put both of their pieces together about the domestic abuse. And for a man who has been a perpetrator to be in a room, as we were working together with mostly survivors, and survivors one woman whose daughter had been killed by her abuser, horrendous. But the level of his accountability and remorse and ability to be with the survivors and it was extraordinary. There's no way to describe this transformation. And he talks about wanting to be, that the part of him that had to die was the monster, the part of him that thought he had to beat his wife, the one who was insecure, all of those things. But the part where the medicine was who he really was underneath that. A man who wanted to be a good human being, a good husband, somebody who could love, and who had in fact saved her life in the desert. So it was about reminding him of who his essential person had been, the man who would have died in the desert to save her. And his tears, all of it, there was no other word to describe it other than transformational. And for audience members, women, to just thank him for saying and admitting things that their abusers could never have said.
Now, this was a piece with other abusers, that first piece that he did?
The very first piece was a piece about homelessness that was with many kinds of people. The second piece with all men, no, he was the only man in there who had been abusing his family members. Mm-hmm. But that last piece was all people who had been affected by domestic abuse, including a social worker who was working with a couple, and the husband killed the children, even though she had been working with them, and survivors and another social worker. But Louise was the only person in there who was a perpetrator.
Oh, wow. What courage. Wow. Very impressive story.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about yourself. You hear all these stories. You work with all these stories. How do you do it?
Well, I think mostly because I have a meditation practice that's been really at the center of my life for many, many years. I have extraordinary friends, and I don't have a very busy, cluttered life. I need to spend quite a lot of time in downtime and just relaxing. I had a hard time when I was in Northern Ireland, I must say. I was there for 5 years working, and some of the work was so intense, and things are still going on. There's still an active paramilitary presence. People are overwhelmed by, not having justice and feeling the need to have their story heard. There's been no Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So there I found it quite hard because I was without my usual supports, and I think 5 years was long enough. So I was glad to come home and be immersed again in my circles, of healing friends and my Jewish congregation and my Sangha. And,
Wow. So it is that intense on you, and then you need to find your own support system and healing processes as well.
Yes, and having said that, of course the other side to it is that working with people and walking with them, being in prison with men who have committed murder and listening to their stories and loving them, has opened my life. I mean, I feel like in some ways I've had the best life anyone could ever have. Like who gets to work with refugees that were boat people from Vietnam and get to be in their homes and know their stories and their hearts, and work with prisoners and work with women who've lost everything, and, to just walk with people in their grief and their sorrow and their love and their, with their souls, and to be inspired by them. It puts everything in perspective when you hear these stories. One of the women I worked with was a refugee from Cambodia, and she lived in a refugee camp in Thailand, in a hole in the ground for a year and a half, breathing through a stick of bamboo.
A year and a half.
A year and a half. And at night, people would put food down the hole for her. She slept in the hole. She breathed through the hole. Just unbelievable, unspeakable stories that human beings go through. So it's a privilege.
And do you find at the end, for example, in Northern Ireland, that when people have been witness to each other's despair, truth, all of that there is some peace made between them? Do you see people?
Yes. In two of the all of the pieces, but two in particular, because there was somebody whose husband had been horribly blown up and killed by the IRA, and there was a woman who had been in the IRA in that piece, and they have become fast friends. And in one of the other pieces, one of the paramilitaries who would have been part of the death threat on the governor and the governor now tour together. They're like they get together all the time, and they do programs now using the films. They love being together. They completely trust each other. It's phenomenal, and you just see friendships build and trust build and an understanding that really it was, especially in Northern Ireland, it really was an accident of birth. Whose family, what community, what religion were you born into? What got inculcated? And how different it would have been if you had been born in a different place.
So impressive.
And that Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think underneath, it's always what's underneath. Everybody wants safety and freedom and peace and, a place to let themselves grow, So it's a question of finding those places underneath where the commonality is.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, for those of our listeners who are more interested in this, they can go to the website, of course. What else would you suggest for people who are interested?
I'd be happy for people to write to me at Teya Tova, TEYATOVA at AOL.com, and that's also on the website, theaterofwitness.org. They can read my book, which they can get through Amazon, which is Theater of Witness, and then there's a subtitle, but that would get you to it. And if they're interested to have come and give a presentation wherever they live or potentially work on a new project, I'm very open.
Oh, beautiful. So we always ask our guests what final message would they like to leave with the listeners. So, Teya, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
I think it's the importance of the stories that we have, that we often have medicine in our stories filled with wisdom and love, and that we also have the ability to transform our stories, and that using story can be so deeply important.
Beautiful. So for what you're saying is that all of us have stories, and maybe we should be telling our stories more.
Yes. Witnessing them, working with them, finding the imagery, all of that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Teya. Let me just repeat the webpage, theaterofwitness.org, her book called Theater of Witness, and her email address, Teya Tova, that's TEYATOVA, at AOL.com. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Zena. This was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Texas Conflict Coach. We hope you've enjoyed the program. You can find over 300 podcasts archived to listen at your own convenience at texasconflictcoach.com or download the podcast at iTunes or Stitcher Radio. To learn about upcoming radio programs and resources, sign up for our monthly e-newsletter.